Bridges Out of Poverty, and this is our first of 3 sessions. As a reminder, all participants on this call are in listen-only mode and cannot unmute themselves. If you have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post your questions in the Q&A or chat box, and we will address them throughout this webinar. A reminder that this session is recorded. The presentation, recording, and any materials presented during today's meeting will be available on icsps.illinoisstate.edu website, and I'll share some links with you in the chat as well in just a few moments. In an effort to be as accessible as possible, this webinar will be offering closed captioning, as well as the recorded session will encompass closed captioning additionally. At the end of the webinar and tomorrow, each attendee will receive an email with a survey link. Please provide feedback and any suggestions you have to help us improve our upcoming webinars through that survey. A reminder that if you have a faulty internet connection or would prefer to call in, you can do so by calling into this webinar using the phone number in your original registration email, and I will also post that into the chat. So with that, I want to kick us off with just a few poll questions just to learn who's all here. So our first poll question is, which partner do you represent? And you should see that on your screen. I'll give you about 25 seconds for answers. All right, about 5 more seconds, and then I'll share our results. All right, so we have each of the titles represented here, as well as other partners, stakeholders, and state and local workforce innovation board members. So awesome, welcome to everyone. We have a great group here today, good turnout, so I'm very excited. And then our next poll question is a geographic question. So where is your local area? And again, I'll give you 25 or 30 seconds to answer. All right, I'm going to close out the poll in just a second here. So this is pretty amazing. We have a pretty, more or less equivalent spread. We're just close to it. So that's awesome. We have Chicago, Northern Illinois, Central, Southern, and statewide. So this is so great. You all are in for a real treat today. I'm very excited for this presentation, and I'd love to kick it over to our presenter. So go ahead and take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Molly. Molly, did you want to say anything about these next couple slides, or you just want me to scoot through them?
No, you can go right ahead. I'm filling in for Kirsten today, who you may have seen in other webinars. So if anyone has tech questions, just go ahead and type in the chat and I'll help you out.
Wonderful. Thank you. And these were questions that were answered by the polling. So you see here that my name is Melissa Martin. I'm a Bridges Out of Poverty facilitator. And some of you may be familiar with AHA Processes curriculum. And Molly and I were chatting earlier this week, and I had said that I'm a little frustrated that it took me so long to realize this information, because it has changed how I interact with people, it has made me a better supervisor, a more empathetic facilitator and instructor. This was groundbreaking for me, and some of you might have been through a Bridges Out of Poverty workshop before. I have the luxury of being in and out of this curriculum all the time, and every time I still learn and grow in my understanding of how challenging it can be to be in poverty. So you heard that this is a 3-part series. Yes, so this is the first session. Today we're just going to explore the mental models for different social classes. I will do a lot of talking. There'll be a part where you can interact. Take what you can from it. I'm glad it's being recorded, because because I need to go back sometimes and go, okay, I was so focused on that part that I wasn't paying attention as much to that part. And so I challenge you to go back and look at the information and continue to grow and to apply it in your world. I teach credit and non-credit classes. Credit classes in a couple community colleges. Love my credit students. Most of them are right out of high school, so they already know everything. Kinda. Lots of theories and lots of information, which is great. And this is a wonderful theory and wonderful information. What I like to do is balance that with the non-credit side, like what I'm doing here. So the theories are great, but it's the application where really the hard work comes into play. That's you taking the information, then actually applying it to your world. And so that's my challenge to you, is to understand and to go through the material, but then how is that going to shape the way that you interact with people and the way that you do your work? And thank you all for doing the great work that you're doing. How do we layer and keep going? So today is the theories around mental models. And then next week, we will talk about the hidden rules that come. So we're going to go deeper into that and some of the research centered around poverty, as well as in session 3, that's where the application part is going to really hit home. So we're going to talk about the awareness of language and then using different resources and some tools that AHA Process has provided. So thank you very much for your work, and then for working through these 3 sessions that will build upon one another. So Dr. Payne started this process, and you can see it came along with this getting ahead training down here. So working with individuals, how do we help them get ahead? As Dr. Payne began to develop the research, found out that it was very complicated. And you know that working with people in poverty is not easy, and there are a lot of factors that come into play. And so this model was developed, and you will see that there's 4 lenses in which to look at the information. So one is on an individual level. What are we doing with individuals? How do individuals take in information, and how do they grow and get ahead? Then there's also this middle institution level. What is your institution doing that can help, or maybe put up some unintentional barriers to working with people in poverty? What is your community doing? So for this one, think about your communities, and are there processes in place or systems that maybe put up some barriers to accessing services, or to hinder people's ability to move forward? And then overarching all of them are policies. So what policies exist as people that could help or hinder those that are living in poverty? And you can see that it's complicated. We got some different layers here about getting ahead, staying ahead, and giving back. Yes, I like this diagram better because it fits my personality a little bit better. So as you look at these 4 components, where do you have the most impact? So think about, are you coming from poverty? Are you working directly with people in poverty? Are you a part of an institution that serves people in poverty, or interacts with those in poverty? Are you a part of a community, which we all are, but what is the community doing to help or hinder those in poverty? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. What are systems in place? Think about transportation, think about access to internet, think about different sources or different ways the community helps or hinders. And then are there some policies that exist either on a local, either on an institutional level, level, your county, your state, on a federal level? Like, what are some policies? Think about, so what I want you to do is think about, where do you have the most impact? It'd be great if you could do all 4. Yay, go change the world. However, think about, where can you move the needle the most, and how does this apply to that lens? Okay, so you were emailed a worksheet, and they said, could you survive? So could you survive in poverty, middle class, wealth? And it had some different designations. Anybody, so I invite you to put in the chat, what were some interesting themes, or do you have any questions about the statements that were centered around those in poverty? What were some common themes, and what could you, oh, thank you, Molly, for putting that there again. What were some themes? What were some commonalities? What was interesting? What did you see? And you're welcome to put that in the chat at any time about those living in poverty. And Molly, I think Samantha has a comment. Raised her hand. So Sherry said there are 6 social classes in the US, and AHA process has boiled them down to these 3. Yes, great point, Sherry, that it's difficult to move up. Middle class numbers are shrinking. And then middle class is a big designation, right? So you could be lower middle class, upper middle class, middle class, right? So there's different designations, yes. The less money you have, the more work you need to do to survive. Great observation, Melissa. And Daniel said they've seen people in poverty seem to always be in crisis mode. Wonderful observation, and we'll come back to that. Great comment, Anne. No, Cheyenne, sorry. About how do we have access to care? One of the curriculums for the AHA process, this is Bridges Out of Poverty, but there's also Bridges to Health and Healthcare, and I work with a hospital, and we've been talking a lot about how do people access healthcare and what are some barriers, and healthcare is a system, and they have checkpoints and parameters. And if you're able to navigate those, your care may come easily. If you're not, if you're in that crisis mode, that's, yeah, that's true. Great comments that are coming in. Keep going. Thank you. Educational access, excellent. Yeah, Kathleen, that's a great point as far as if you go back to your Psych 101 classes with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Remember, we have those basic needs. And if you're struggling to get those basic needs met, those other needs take time to, or more mental energy to figure out. And so, yeah, if you're here, then how do you begin to navigate some of the complexity that middle class and wealth kind of deal with? Concrete thinking, I like that one. Kamala, the survey link is in the chat if you want to go back and check it out. Love the comment, Mark, about those in poverty usually reactive and not proactive. Survival mode versus thriving mode. I love the terminology there. Ah, the criminalization of poverty, yes. Great comments. Thank you so much for keeping these in play and talking about some of the commonalities. It just is in poverty. How many of you could identify more and share what you're comfortable sharing? How many of you could identify with middle class? Like when you read those statements in that survey, you were like, oh yeah, this makes sense to me. Yeah. Yeah, what I find if you are, and this is an overgeneralization, certainly not everybody, but if you are successful in a workplace or educational system, then yeah, those concepts surrounding middle class makes sense to you. Go back to the comment I think Mark had made earlier about survival versus thriving, and in middle class, we are very much future oriented. And so think of our businesses, our educational institutions, our religious institutions, our hospitals are very much in that middle class mindset, like it's goal setting and problem solving and planning and processes. All those things come into middle class. Nice, good. Some of you are identifying, yeah, this one makes sense, but I can see where I fit in other ways. What I like about, I'm a social scientist, and so very rarely do people fit in nice, neat little boxes. We're using the 3 designations here, but as you guys are saying, well, kind of in this one I can see myself, but mainly in this one, well, maybe some of that one. Yeah, people are mushy and complicated. We are, and the people we work with are too. So just because we're using those 3 designations doesn't mean that that you lock in and you're only that. Yeah, it can be a little bit more flexible. Yeah. Checking out the chats, good information. Ah, yes, good. Thank you, Rhonda, for sharing that. Yeah, and some of you have moved back and forth, and you know, depending on what's happening, think about how much the pandemic has influenced this conversation. Great observation on how we pull in that information, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Any questions? Anything you didn't understand in wealth? Anything where you're like, oh yeah, that's me, I got this. How are you feeling about the conversation or the questionnaire for the wealth mentality? Everybody got it? You're like, yep, that makes perfect sense to me. Wealth, nailed it. Ah, great point, Rebecca. Yeah. Yeah. So you guys have talked about how there's shrinking number of middle class. We've heard the adage of the growing number of poor. We've heard the adage of the 1%. When we look at bridges out of poverty, it is not about dollar amounts. Now, finance certainly influences a lot of what we're doing, yes, but it is more than just dollar amounts. Think about if you were to give somebody $5 and now they had more money, they have $5 more than they did last month, that they would move from poverty to middle class. No, that's absurd. One of the things that I appreciate about this curriculum is that it is more about attitude and generational habits. It's not about dollar amounts. Now, dollar amounts influences, but think about those of you who are saying, oh yeah, I was raised by a single mother and now I'm here doing this or whatever. If you've read Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, you will see, and the Netflix show was good, but the book is really good. But he was raised in poverty, and then he went into the military, and then now he is living in a middle-class lifestyle. It's more of it's an attitude shift. It isn't necessarily about money. It's about habits of behavior, and he had to work through that in order to be successful, and the military helped him. That's his story. I recommend the book. But what helped you move beyond that? Who mainly plays the lottery? Typical people in poverty play the lottery. What happens when they win? And think about if you've heard those cases, or more relevant example is what are people doing with stimulus checks? And in my white middle class judgy brain, if somebody in poverty gets a stimulus check and then they, in my judgy brain, blow it on whatever, I'm like, what you could have, you know, made a house payment, or you could have done this, right? And I come at life from a very middle class mentality. Think about how somebody in poverty is coming at that windfall from a very poverty mentality, and you bring those habits of behavior with you. So that's interesting. I did see in the chat somebody did comment about wealth and it's foreign to them. I like the comment of the wealth had more freedom surrounding money. Good observation. Some overgeneralization just as we're working through this. Think about individual people, and that's what we're going to work through in session 3. How do we apply it to individual people? So nice job, kind of coming up some overview and some commonalities. If you've read Educated by Tara Westover, I'll double check that. And she says that the freedom of money is to think of things beyond money. And I saw that in your comments of wealth, have the freedom to think of things beyond money, middle class as well, poverty when you are day to day, that's all encompassing. Okay, so I want to move to this next section. Let me give you a few other things that it really reinforced what you're saying in the chat. And thank you for your participation in the chat. Generational poverty and situational poverty are very different. And you will see that generational poverty, habits of behavior are passed from generation to generation. So somebody think of, put in the chat of an example of where you have seen behaviors reinforced generationally. Anybody have an example? Families being unassisted. Thank you, Michelle. Excellent. Yes. And students not wanting to go to college because fear of debt. Great example. And that being reinforced. Oh, look at all the comments coming in. Beautiful. Yes. Young motherhood. Good example. Abuse, neglect. We are passing habits of behavior. We don't have time today, but there's a great video called Historical Trauma. If you want to Google historical trauma and look up the information surrounding it, we pass that trauma to our next generations. Now, the research around historical trauma is centered around race and like the indigenous tribes, people of color, and how we take those experiences that we've had and we pass them on. How many of you have grandparents, great-grandparents who will wash their plastic bags because they grew up in a time where resources were scarce, and so they're going to wash their plastic bags and reuse them because that trauma of doing without still affects them, even though they're fine, they have enough money to go buy more plastic bags, it's okay, right? I'm thinking like Ziploc bags. Then they can go get more bags, it's not an issue. But look at how we take that trauma and we pass it on, and now we're going to do more things. Yeah. Oh, great comment, Safia. Nice. Okay, so generational poverty, yes. Habits of behavior. So think of poverty that's if something were to happen, you've heard the comment of we're all like one good car wreck away and medical bills away from being homeless. I don't. That's a comment that kind of goes around. Medical expenses are horrendous. So let's pretend it's not going to happen. Let's not happen today, but let's pretend that I found myself in that situation. I got in a car wreck, but all these medical bills. I would address that issue from my white middle class brain, and I would address the problem in that way. My husband and I would look at our savings and our insurance policies, and we would pull that in, and we would address the crisis through my middle class brain. So if we became poor, we would problem solve from a middle class attitude. So think about how powerful that is. What if somebody in poverty came into hard times, like a pandemic? Guess what? They're going to address that issue same from their lens and their experience. From a poverty mentality, they're going to address that. So that's really important. It was powerful for me when I processed that, because then I began to think about, oh, so that's why when somebody misses an appointment for WIC and I go, what, are you nuts? This is right. We're trying to help you. Why can't you make it to an appointment? But there's a crisis there and they're trying to solve it. But guess what is the most important crisis of the day? It's that reactive comment rather than the proactive. Fascinating when it comes to dealing with how they are making decisions. This next slide says that it takes 3 generations to get from generational poverty to middle class. So if you go to my dad, raised generationally poor, came from a long line of feast and famine construction workers. My dad was the oldest of 7 kids. I'll tell you more about him when we meet about hidden rules. Every family has things, no judgment. Great family, wonderful, until you're at the family picnic, and then when the alcohol and the guns come out, you want to be way away from the picnic. But in the meantime, no judgment. Every family has things. But in the meantime, loads of fun. So my dad was raised in that environment. He, like J.D. Vance, went into the military. let me back up. He married my mom, who grew up middle class. So they were situational poverty. They're a young couple, they're starting out, they have me, yay. But they didn't have a lot, but the military provided that stability that my dad did not grow up with. So early on in their marriage, my folks were situational poverty. Then as my dad moved higher up in the ranks, we became middle class. They raised my sister and I very middle class. So look at that. 3 generations it took to move the needle. This is very important because think about all the great work you're doing. And in my judgy middle class brain, I go, what? I'm helping you. You're done, right? Move. Now you can take care of yourself. Self-sufficiency, middle class understanding. So very key point, because it's not going to happen overnight. Change takes time. And Kit, I saw you, wait, who is it, Kit? Yeah, I saw your comment. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But think about how much that takes time. So 3 generations to move the needle. My dad had the support of the military. Without that, it would have been continued to be a struggle, because he brought those habits of behavior that he learned from his folks, generational poverty. He needed to move past that to be able to raise us in middle class. The work you're doing is powerful, but it's not going to happen overnight. How many of you have made a New Year's resolution? Yeah, we do that sometimes, right? New Year's resolution. How long does it last? 2 months? 2 weeks? 2 minutes? Sherry even quit making them. 3 months? Nice job, Doreen. Yeah. So it takes time. Change takes time, even when you want it. And think about how changing whole family dynamics and rising above that really takes time. Even if you want it, that takes time. So keep doing the good work that you're doing, but don't burn out. Okay, so I want to go back to that comment that mentality towards emergencies like COVID. Yeah, so think about the pandemic, because the pandemic has really thrown the whole globe into a tailspin and trying to figure out what's going on. And that's a lot of change that I wasn't prepared for. So think about how if I had lost my job during COVID, I would address that issue from a very middle class mindset. And this will become clearer as we go forward. So I would pre-plan, I would come up with a system. I would probably go back to my envelope model. Thank you, Stephen Covey. This is my rent money. This is my entertainment money. This is my saving money. This is right. I'd go back to my, very calculated, organized way of dealing with money. Think about somebody in poverty. Well, this is just the next crisis. So we're going to be reactive and roll through that. That was the point I was making. I hope that happened. That helped, Kit. You bring with you your problem-solving skills from different socioeconomic influences that you have had when you were growing up. Safia, good observation again. We will not get into racism directly, but you can make a lot of links. That makes this conversation even bigger, and thank you for highlighting that. I'm a firm believer that we need to talk about those conversations. This one, due to time, we won't get into that as much. Okay, and just scanning through the chat. Yes, and the evictions, especially as stimulus checks are ebb and flow, and the rent assistance and all of that. Yeah. Okay. So 3 generations. And I bring that up because I don't want you wonderful social services people out there to burn out. Because you do help people, and that's great. And you work very hard, and that's wonderful. Be patient and persistent is my advice, because it does take time to move the needle. And you are making a difference. It's just that I get impatient and I want to make a difference today. Well, I am, but I probably won't see the fruits until, 3 generations or so from now. We're going to talk about that with M period is the name. Preferred having less money because it was less of a hassle. Yeah, that's a great observation. Okay. This comment says, or this slide says, knowledge is a key form of privilege. Just like social access, race, and money, how you spend your time determines your knowledge base to a large extent. How you spend your time determines your knowledge base. Think about, This means my mom was right. I am the sum of my 5 closest friends. True, right? Think about where you're at. How does that influence you? Has anybody taken a new job and then that opened your eyes and you're like, oh, I'm kind of passionate about this now, or I kind of know about this. That determines your knowledge base. Think about how this ties into if you are only surrounded by people in poverty, what is your knowledge base? What are you learning? What's being reinforced? Think about your middle class lives, workplaces, what is being reinforced? What are some unspoken norms that exist? Think about if you are operating in wealth, what is being reinforced in that environment? And I know those are 3 very clear designations, but I know it's mushy, but yeah, you are being reinforced by those that you are around. Thank you for pushing back. I'm glancing at the chat as I'm talking around. If I'm not addressing inequalities of race, class, and poverty, this conversation is mute. Yes. Yeah, and I want to invite you to keep pushing back. Thank you for saying that. I agree. It's a huge systemic issue. And so let's pull in some of those comments. I invite those of you that are commenting and pulling in that information. Let's keep bringing it up. Let's continue the conversation. I agree. Yeah, and this will come into play more in a little bit when we talk about mental models, as well as on that 3rd day. So yeah, thank you. Looking through the rest of the chats. Yeah, and thank you for reinforcing Carmela's comment. Nice, good point on how soft skills can be difficult when trying to obtain employment. Poverty does look different among different regional, racial, and cultural communities. Good point. Okay, this next slide says, when I talk to hospitals about co-investing in health issues, the socioeconomic status gradient says the richer you are, the healthier you are. Do you agree? The richer you are, the healthier you are. What do you guys think? Good point, Adriana, where you can afford to go to a doctor. Yeah, it is a generalization. I agree. Yeah, and while it's true that if your appendix is going to go, your appendix is going to go, right? It doesn't really care how much is in your bank account. However, think about how living in poverty is a risk factor for stress-related issues. It's not entirely due to lack of access, but to be under that stress, and excellent to bring up mental health issues, to be under that kind of stress. And go back to that comment earlier about proactive versus reactive. Now, I have genetic markers on both sides of my family for breast cancer. So what do I make time to do every year? Go get my mammogram, yeah? Take time off of work, schedule it. Sometimes I get to go twice because they saw something, and I happily go back and say, yeah, let's do it again, let's figure it out. Think about how I have the luxury of making time for proactive healthcare. Think of somebody in poverty. They need to take time off of work. They need to be able to get there. They need to have insurance in order to access it, or they need to find some place that's going to accommodate if they don't have insurance. That's a lot of, it goes back to that comment earlier about people saying, well, if I have less money, it's less hassle. Yeah, it's a lot of work to be able to work through that. And it's for something that is a phantom, right? I don't have breast cancer. I don't think. Why go take time out of dealing with the crisis at the moment to address something that may not even be there? So proactive healthcare, very much a middle class mindset. When do people go to the doctor if they don't have time, money, other resources? They go when it's a crisis. Now, it'd be cheaper if we could catch it early with a mammogram rather than waiting till it's stage 4, whatever. But when does that become a priority? And so, yes, think about how this impacts what's going on. Rebecca's comment as we're ending this slide. No heat, no water, no transportation, fear of job loss, getting an hour and a half away to do healthcare providers. Yes, it's complicated. Mental health, I saw pop up earlier. I'm not reading them as fast as they're coming in, but thank you for contributing. Yes. Oh, and then with the healthcare system, there can be some discrimination. True. No sick days, not paid enough to see the doctor. All of these things can hinder. And then what do? We criticize them for going to the ER. Why are you going to the ER? We should get a primary care physician, but that's a whole nother level of planning and organization that may not exist. Oh, love that comment. It's not a lack of access, it's a blockage of access and even unintentional. And my healthcare workers out there, hang in there, breathe. Yeah, it is. What are you doing to help remove some of those barriers? The healthcare system is a pretty good system. Good as in solid. And so to change that, it's not just immediate course correction. It's slow. It's like moving a ocean liner, right? It's that slow course correction to move the needle. Okay. Individuals bring with them the hidden rules of the class in which they were raised. Yeah. And we talked about that. You are pulling in experiences from your upbringing and your interactions. Remember, knowledge is a key point of privilege. What are you bringing in? So you bring with them, and we'll talk more about the hidden rules next week. 3 things that help somebody move out of poverty: education, relationships, and employment. Go back to your workplace. Where do you have the most impact? Is it around education? Is it about establishing those relationships and building trust? Or is it about employment? Yeah. Yeah, Camilla and Mark talking about stereotyping. Yes, very, very problematic. Not to simplify it, but I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So this slide is what we're going to end up with on the session 3, but I want to highlight it and just kind of put this in the back of your head for now. To understand people from poverty, the definition of poverty will be the extent to which an individual does without resources. And that term resources, very important. So this reinforces the fact that it isn't always just about money. I had mentioned earlier that who mainly plays the lottery and what happens when they win. And so think of somebody from poverty is going to spend that windfall on past wants, right? Think about how a mother interacts with their child. And my child has been wanting these cool tennis shoes, for years. And now I finally have money that I can provide these cool tennis shoes. And so he can go to school and he can be all kinds of, yay, we got this, right? So think about how solving immediate crisis or past wants, in my middle class brain, I'm like, no, you should save it and you should use it for later. But money is one of the resources, but it's not the only resource. So we'll come back around to this in session 3. I just want you to begin to think about, as we roll through this, the importance of what kind of resources are out there, and look, what kind of support, what kind of resources do people have in order to make it work? Have you heard that, like, it doesn't work on paper, right? I have a budget, it doesn't work on paper, but I make it work. That's because of all the rest of these resources. Okay, so what we're going to do next is I would like you to think of an adult in generational poverty. Don't name names. It's a small state. There's lots of people, but I'm sensitive to all sides of. Yeah, anyway, so think of an adult in generational poverty. Imagine if you followed that person around for a year, observing what happened, how they spent their time. Using the Google Jamboard, I'm going to give you the link. Molly's going to give you the link in the chat. I want you to write your observations in the circle so that the circle represents an average day in the life of this person. Now you're all going to contribute. So make room, and you can even go outside the circle, but think about what are they doing? Where are they going? Who are they seeing? How are they getting there? Right? Just put a lot of observations, similar to what we just did with the survey. You can add text or little pictures with items that indicate their average day. Now the link is in the chat, but for those of you who want a Let me show you what I'm looking for. So here you are in the Google Jamboard. A lot of you have already jumped in. If you want to go over here to the text box and click it, then you could put in here with finding childcare. Might be something that's going to use their day. Maybe you want to put in multiple jobs. Maybe you want to put in, like last group was smoking was a very big issue. So they jumped in with smoking. So you go ahead and add in to Google Jamboard the best you can, and we'll come up with some themes and some commonalities. Oh, I'm sorry that we've maxed out how many people are in. If you want to add stuff to the chat, then I can add your stuff in here as best I can. And Molly, you're welcome to do that too. I don't know if you're
if people add in the chat, I can add it to the Jamboard as well.
Nice, good. Sorry about that. And if you can't see what's there, if you go back to my share screen, then you'll be able to see, I have it called up, so you should be able to see it there.
We can't see it on your share screen right now, Melissa, so you might have to switch out of the PowerPoint.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Molly.
Yep.
Okay, there, is that better?
Yep, we can see it. Sorry, I wasn't unmuted.
Oh, that's all right. And thanks
yep.
for adding stuff in there. Good. Nice, good comments. Stephanie, good comment about how to try and manage money and pay bills. My sister was poor. She would say, wonder who gets my money today, the light department or the power department? Who has sent me the most collection notices? That's who wins. Beautiful, love it, thank you. Care for ailing family member, yes. Worrying about family. Putting off their needs to prioritize caring for their kids. Car broke down, yes. And how many people do you know in poverty that have several cars and they're just piecing together parts? Only one will run at a time because they have to take these parts and move them into those parts, and then yes. Paycheck to paycheck. Laundromat, that's time consuming. Helping the kiddos get off to school, waiting in long lines. Navigating the social help system, excellent point, Kathleen. Worrying about healthcare, taking care of younger siblings, worrying about children. These are wonderful, thank you. And thanks for sliding them all over the place and making room, it's great. No support system, interesting. Lack of support from family. Lack of literacy skills. Finding a job that fits the kid's schedule and needs, yeah. Choosing between furthering education and adequate employment, yeah. Seeking all resources available to avoid remaining in poverty, wonderful. Okay, and you're welcome to keep adding to this and shrink and grow or whatever. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. So what you have created is a mental model. So a mental model is an internal picture of how the world works. It exists below the awareness. They're theories in use, often unexamined. but they do determine how we act, and they can help or interfere with learning. For dialogue with somebody to occur, regardless of who they are, you must suspend your own mental model. Like, you have an understanding of how the world works, you got to set that aside and listen and interact with them. Hold on, I lost my chat when I went to share screen. Let me call that back up. Whoop, just a minute. Oh, and you couldn't see the PowerPoint. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Coming back, not that one. I'll get there. Hold on. Okay. You can see the PowerPoint and I can see the chat. I think we're all back on track now.
We see it great. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And I put the chat back up so I don't miss all the good things you're saying. Okay, so here is what Phil Duvall and the research crew at AHA Process came up with. So when we are looking at the mental model for poverty, you will see that, was it Kathleen who had said agency time, the ability to navigate the social services system? Yes, that comes into play. So let's play that out with transportation. Now, some of you live in places where public transportation exists. Many of you might live where public transportation is not as adequate. Hold on, I'm still not seeing my chat. Now I figure I'm missing out on all the fun things you're saying. So I'm going to do that one more time. I apologize. Okay, there it is. Now I'll go back to this one. Keeps hiding behind my other screen. Okay, let me say this part and then I'll follow up with what you're saying in a minute. Okay, so let's balance that out with transportation. So with transportation and agency time, if we marry those together, think of a single mother who lives in a rural area of Illinois. Where do they catch the bus? So what are they doing? I'm going to do it like this. I really don't like not seeing the chat. One more time. Still not showing up. Hold on. There it is. See, now I can't see my thing. Okay. So if I go like this, I apologize for the weird view here. Okay, so single mother, 2 kids, double stroller. Okay, so yeah, Molly's saying you walk to the bus and you get to the bus. Now, can the bus accommodate the double stroller? In some communities, no. Wheelchairs, yes. Double stroller, no. You have to leave that behind. So now I have to go home, take the double stroller back, come back with my 2 kids, and then I get on the bus. How much does a bus cost? Do I have it? Do I know? Is that explicitly stated before I walk the 5 blocks or 10 blocks to get to the bus stop? Or now do I need to go back and get more money or whatever? Do I pay cash? Do I have a card? With a pandemic, a lot of cash transactions diminished, but if I don't have a debit card, then how do I pay? So all of these things could come into play. Yeah, Molly, could you do that? That would be great if you want to share, since I am having issues with it was working great before, but it wasn't. Okay, so I get on the public transportation with my 2 kids. I'm ready to go to DFS. Yay. And I don't know what about your DFS. I'm not in your world. I'm sure they're wonderful, phenomenal people. Thank you, Molly. Now I'm going to go to my chat. Now I have all the things. So I get to, does the bus take me right to DFS? No, probably laps the city and does all sorts of things and multiple stops. So somebody had said earlier, a couple hours. Maybe it's the next stop and that's great, or whatever. So I get off of the bus. Think about some of your not so nice weather days. And where is DFS? Do I go right in? Do I have to find it? Does the bus stop near DFS? Do I have to walk there? How do I get there? So I finally get in there and Great. Yeah, Kathleen, good point about how, see, that's why I like the chat. How they don't have a debit card because they have overdrawn account, they can't pay for it, so they don't have a debit card, so now they're doing cash transactions. Bad sidewalks, no sidewalks, all these things are coming into play. So I walk into DFS, give my kids some Cheerios so that they can sit in the waiting room. I get up to my DFS person and I go, okay, I'm ready here. I'm here for my appointment. Okay, where's your form of ID? Well, I don't have a driver's license, so do I have a form ID? Okay, you need a form of ID. Wow. Okay, so now I need to go to the DMV. Does my public transportation take me to the DMV? Do I have the documentation I need to get there? Yeah, sure. You need a passport, a proof of residence, a past driver's license, Oh, now I need to get all that stuff. So when you look at agency time and transportation, look at how complicated this could be. And I am in a rural state and people just say, well, you should just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Great. Just do the things. We have services, but look how complicated that can be. I think I read in the chat earlier that one of the agencies has a grant to pay for transportation. That's awesome. Look at how you're removing barriers so that people can access. One of the agencies I work with, they also got a grant, and so they'll pay for your taxi so you can go from A to B done. And think about how challenging that could be. Okay, if we keep, if you don't have access or you don't, you need to spend all day getting to DFS and then to the DMV and going on. Okay, keep moving around the circle. That jobs, and that was some of the things that you guys came up with, not a job, but multiple jobs and jobs that can center around their childcare. How much, which is over in this part of the circle, how much is childcare in your area per child per month on average? What do you think? Anybody know? What does childcare cost in your area? $150 a week? A month? 1,000K a month. Depends on the age. 250 plus. The more you earn, the more you pay, with or without vouchers. Look at the complexity. This is great. Quality childcare is as much as a college tuition. 200 a week, 300 weekly per child, $1,000 a month and minimum. So that's why people, and we saw that with stimulus checks and with getting jobs. I can make enough to pay for my childcare. Well, that's not incentive. Why do I need to pay to be away from my kids? So some people are making a choice, having to make a choice between childcare and working, and sometimes it might be more financially beneficial to stay home with your kids than it would be to, yes. Good. Can you find childcare? And in the pandemic, we saw that happen too, where childcares were taking less kids or closing, and then shift care comes into play. Yeah. Okay. Family and friends is next on our list here. Very important. Somebody in the chat, tell me why. What are family and friends to people in poverty? Everything, support, lifeline. Some don't live near family, true. How to navigate a crisis, valuable resources, childcare providers and support, babysitters, therapists, drivers, love it. Emergency transportation, stability. Yeah, they're a form of resource. And we're going to come back to that when we talk about middle class and mental models around middle class, because it changes a bit. Okay, the next one, and thank you for your blowing up the chat. That's good stuff. Think about legal issues and criminal justice. Let's go back to Camilla's comment on race. Yes, this is a big issue that we are facing, have been facing for a long time, continuing to face legal issues and criminal justice system. So think about me, Melissa, white middle class. That's who I am, right? Think about what happens if I run a red light. What happens? Here comes the cop, da 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 da. I need your license and registration. And I'm like, damn it. get my license and registration, hand it to the cop. The cop goes to the back, sits in their car, makes me sweat it out, comes back. You would think because I'm female, that's the stereotype that I'm going to get off. No, I'm not. My husband has been stopped by the same cop doing this exact same wrong thing. Got a warning both times. Do you think that would happen to me? No, not at all. Going to give me a ticket. So I get a ticket, right? How do I pay that ticket? I can either go down to the courthouse and get with my debit card. I can mail them a check. I can pay in cash. Some states, I don't know about yours, but some states let you pay the cop right there. Like, oh, dang it, here's my check, or here's some cash, and I'm gonna pay my ticket right there. I don't know what your state does. But I thought that was really interesting because my state does not do that. So how much is that ticket gonna cost? How much is running a red light cost in Illinois? $100, $150, $175? Okay. So, but I'm wearing my seatbelt. Do you have a, good kid behavior, like $20 off or something? Okay. What is that going to do to me? So look at the information blowing up, anywhere from $100 to $200, maybe $300. I identify as white. I look very white. That's very important to acknowledge. What is that going to do with me, Melissa, white middle class, to my budget? Me, Melissa, white middle class. Right, not much. You're right, Melissa. You know what? There goes my entertainment budget for the month. Less Starbucks. Good point, right? It's going to be like, oh man, it's an inconvenience. Cynthia said, less impact than someone of color. So let's keep playing this out. Think of somebody in poverty, runs a red light. What's going to happen? And you guys have already said in the chat, vastly different experience. So let's go back to that single mom, right? Double stroller, borrows, go back to family and friends. How many of you know people in poverty that have weird Uncle Steve sleeping in the couch? Now, weird Uncle Steve is not related to anybody, but he's always there. And when he's sober, he can watch the kids. Right? I'm making some assumptions about Uncle Steve. So Uncle Steve is going to watch the kids and I can borrow his car. So that way Uncle Steve can live on my couch, because look at what a resource that is. Now I have somebody to watch the kids. I have to drag them through public transportation to get to DFS. So I borrow Uncle Steve's car. I'm driving, I run a red light, single parent, poor. If I can't pay it, so I'll get the ticket. Do I have a driver's license? We already established no. So now that fee goes up. Running a red light, do I have a driver's license? Let's hope that Uncle Steve's car doesn't smell like pot, because whose fault is that? Mine, if I'm driving a car that smells like pot, even though I don't own the pot or do anything with the pot. Yeah. Oh, why would you speed when you're in someone else's car? Good point. Run a red light. Yeah, why would you? So maybe I'll be very careful. But if it happens, look at look at how the bill could go up, and what happens if you don't pay your ticket, which you've already talked about in the chat. So if I don't pay it, now I'm going to be going to jail. And if I go to jail, now I have a tainted record, and what happens to my kids? So me, Melissa, white middle class, running a red light is a huge inconvenience. But for other people, depending on the circumstances or the situation or the race or the poverty level or whatever, that could mean losing your kids. And that's huge. That's huge, because now I get out of jail from the person in poverty, and now I need to get my kids back, which is going through the system. And I also need to be able to get a job, but now I have something on my record, like all sorts of things. Huge, huge inconsistencies for me, Melissa, white middle class, and somebody else running a red light. Think about, how as a parent am I going to keep my kids safe? And think about legal issues and criminal justice systems in the neighborhoods that people grow up in. Am I willing to call the cops? Maybe, or not? What kind of debt do I have? Mental health and chemical dependency, although, and you guys alluded to this in the chat earlier, that exists in all three categories. How do I take care of my health, which we already talked about is very reactive, not proactive. Think about the housing situations, how many families are in the house, why? It's a resource and we're making it work. It doesn't work on paper, but we're making it work. Think about where we're getting our clothing. Think about food insecurities, not food trends, food insecurities. And we'll talk more about that with hidden rules with my dad's family. Think about this icon with children, very important. Yeah. Because how are we protecting our kids and keeping them safe? And we'll come back to that. Think about childcare that we've already talked about, and entertainment, very important, very important. Because that's how I connect with the world. And that's how I can escape the crisis or the stress that I'm in. So look at all of these things in the circle, which is a lot of the things that you did in the Google Jam. And thank you again for your comments. Look at the word in the middle. Relationships. Motivating, driving factor. Protect your relationships. And we talked about that earlier with family and friends, because those are your resources for survival. Very important. Think about the interaction between those in poverty and social services. Well, they're a necessary evil. They're a benefit, yes. And those of you who work in social services, thank you for the work that you're doing. Think about the interaction between people in poverty and the school system. And what is the relationship between those in poverty and those who are working at the school system? How many people in poverty are volunteering for your PTO or PTA services committees? How many of them are showing up for parent-teacher conferences? And why is that? Because that playground assistant, that school secretary, that teacher's aide has the ability to call DFS if they don't think that I'm doing a good job as a parent. If my kid isn't clean enough, isn't well taken care of, isn't whatever. So there's kind of, yay, free childcare. And at the school system, they get free lunch, free breakfast, they get access. Like, I don't have to pay for childcare anymore. I know they're safe between this point and this point in time. Very important, love it. Kids are being socialized, it's good. But there's a level of distrust. It's like, ooh, but they can call DFS on me. So I don't know if I'm gonna, right? So there's how many of you know people who the oldest child is the one that goes to the parent-teacher conference and gets the information? So I'm going to put myself out there, but now you get to be there. Ah, good point, Rebecca. They can't get there, maybe working, maybe afraid. Think about the interaction between people in poverty and the police. And they also have the ability to call if they think that the families are not being taken care of. Think about religious organizations and interactions between those in poverty, and it can be a place for worship, most definitely, and then it can also be a place for services. The church I'm affiliated with, we give out energy assistance. So remember, knowledge is a key form of access. So the poor community knows if you call that church, then they can help with your rent or your energy assistant in cold weather. Yeah. So we're one community and we need to work together. But then look at how this gets complicated. Businesses that exploit the poor, pawn shops, liquor stores, corner stores, rent-to-own stores, laundromats, fast food services, check cashing services, temp services, used car lots, and dollar stores. And if you look up the rise of Dollar General, especially in southern areas, Dollar General is creating food deserts in rural communities because they are building a Dollar General across the street from a local mom and pop store in a small community. Well, think if I have limited money, where am I going to go for dinner? I can buy all those fresh vegetables and food and non-preservative things at the grocery store, or I can grab something out of the freezer case at Dollar General for a lot less money. Think about how that impacts health in our rural communities. Dollar Generals are shutting down local grocery stores because they have to pay a lot of money to get their information, they have to get their food there, fresh food there. So that costs them money that they pass along to the consumers. Dollar General just mass produces and then just gives us not as healthy food, those frozen, high preservative, salt-laden meals. But look, if you have limited money, where are you going to go? And then that affects health. So it's this huge trend. They're equating Dollar General to Walmart in the 90s. Remember how Walmart came in and our main streets kind of shut down. And then now they're saying the same thing, creating these food deserts in rural communities. And they're exploiting the poor because they can give this, and then they just need limited money to get the lasagna, and we're good, the frozen lasagna or whatever, fine. Okay, so take this into account, and I'm double checking the time. Okay, and I do want to leave time at the end for a few questions or comments, so we'll come back around to that. There is a video that I'm actually not going to show in the interest of time, but I do want you to watch it, this one, and I will send it to Molly to get out. Well, actually, let me do that right now so that you can put it in the chat. But it's the Adams County circles. It's called the wage gap. So let me just take a minute and I can snag that. Or Molly, you have it in the, wait, I got it in the PowerPoint. It's in the notes section of the slide before. You know, I'm also going to put the historical trauma one in there as well, because I know I referenced that too. Oh, I don't need that because Molly has that. Okay, I'm going to put these in the chat. Both of these videos I recommend you watching. The first one is this one, which is the Adams County wage gap. And then the other one is the historical trauma video that I referenced earlier. And I invite you to check both of those out. But in the interest of time, we're going to move to the next slide. Okay, so I looked up, and you are welcome to do this as well. This is also, this is 2019 census data. So you will see that the US as of 2019, so this is pre-pandemic, these numbers have drastically changed. So about 12% of people in the US lived in poverty. In Illinois, it was 11.4%. So Molly, if you can go to the next slide. I did break it down and pull out. I don't know if this is a surprise to you, but the 5 lowest ranked counties, so not as much poverty, Kendall wins with only 4% of their population in poverty, to Monroe, McHenry, Grundy, and DuPage. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your counties wrong. So those are your 5 lowest ranked. Your highest ranked counties, 25.4% of the population in Jackson County is in poverty. Then you got Alexander, Donnu, Pulaski, and then Champaign. Yeah. Oh, and I'm going to snag that website. I love new information. So you can go through and look at the census data and see where you fall in poverty ranking as of 2019, which is the most recent I could find. Okay, go to the next one. I also looked up the living wage calculation. So this is livingwage.mit.edu, and they say that in Illinois, so this is state level data, for living wage, if you're one adult with 2 children, you need to be making $38.88 an hour. And then look at how that drops. So if you're one adult, or if you're 2 adults with 2 children, but one is working and one is not. So that goes back to our health or our childcare costs, right? It drops and you can make $32.53 an hour for living wage. Now that's living wage. Poverty wage, you can get by with a lot less. Minimum wage, $10 an hour in Illinois. Okay, go to the next one. How they calculated the living wage is they took average cost of food, childcare, medical, housing, transportation, civic, other required, right? So they pulled all this together. That's how they came up with this figure. Remember, it doesn't work on paper. That's why those resources are very important. Okay, keep going. So think about in your agency. So back to real life, because all sorts of fun theory stuff. So think about if a person has a sense of being linked to the mainstream of society, if, in other words, if they're in the dominant subculture, can they perceive messages as information, or is it more like noise? Is it more like Charlie Brown, right? And the teacher goes, wah, 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 wah. Think of that mom walking in after being on the bus forever with toddlers, 2 toddlers going into DFS. I need to survive. What are they going to hear? What do I need to do to survive? And our social services people, wonderful. Thank you for doing what you do. But they give all sorts of great information. What is the parent going to hear? They're going to hear, okay, what do I need to do in order to survive today? All of the rest is layered on. Yes, are they able to take it in? Are they in crisis mode, or do we need to back up and work with them? Do they have the resources to carry out the plans, or do they get meaningful feedback, or do they get judgment? Okay, keep going. Look how this changes for middle class. So instead of jobs, we have careers. Very focused on education that's future. How many of you have been or know people who are in college and they're racking up a lot of debt? Why? Why would you space all that time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears and money on an education? Well, it's the promise of a better life later. And so think about how impactful that is. The word in the middle before was relationship. For middle class, it's achievement. And we will sacrifice today for tomorrow and feel very justified in doing that. How many times, it says retirement down here, how many times do you see people who work hard so that they can play when they retire? Like, we sacrifice today for the future. We need to take notes from people in poverty because they enjoy today in amongst all the crisis. Think about all the laughter that comes around living in poverty. They've learned to laugh through the pain, laugh through, enjoy. That's why my dad's family is such a hoot, because they're living in the moment. Where middle class, no, we live for tomorrow. People that retire spend all their time waiting to retire, and then as soon as they retire, they spend 2 weeks playing and then drop dead. And you're like, you should have played all along. Like, what were you thinking? But that's very much a middle class mindset. Think not housing, but mortgage payments, that investment in the future, asset. Great comment, Lex, about, you will have a future. It's not guaranteed when you're in poverty, so you do enjoy the moment. Note that it says working long hours, and middle class love and loathe it. I find that's a generational issue, though. Our younger generations are creating more work-life balance, and they're like, no, you're paying me for 40 weeks, so I'm going to work 40 weeks. And our older generation is like, you can do that? Like, what? Like, it's mind-blowing. But do work long hours and get a lot of pride and gratification from doing that, and then loathe it all at the same time. Like, they're a fun bunch. Civic groups and clubs, political action, still mental health, chemical dependency, not debt, but credit card debt. Like, we put that off later. Look at health and prevention, not just health. Remember the little doc in the box icon before? Now it's proactive healthcare. Shopping, vacation, social media, although I would put social media in all the categories, yes. Family and friends, and I said we'd come back to this, changes. What are family and friends to people in middle class? You tell me. What are family and friends in middle class? Support system, can offer financial help. Distractions, excellent point, Melissa, like it. Connections for better opportunities, advisors, assets. social partners, connections. Yeah, it's more choice than it is survival. And how many times have you heard, especially some of our younger generations, like distancing them from family? Like, no, that's a toxic family member. I'm not going to be around them. Less of a burden on them. Yeah. So think about weird Uncle Steve sleeping on the couch. Somebody in poverty is going to be like, yeah, and right? That's okay. And middle class, we have the luxury of saying, Uncle Steve, get out of the house, right? I don't need you to watch the kids or do whatever. So I don't have to put up with your whatever. Yeah. Look at the icon for children. There's a great video out there by Annette LaRue, and she talks about the unequal childhoods and how, remember, it was a playground before, now it's a soccer ball. Think about the skill sets that are being learned. So on a playground, this is unsupervised play after school. Kids go back to the playground and hang out, or whatever park or whatever playground. But that unsupervised play, what are they learning? Negotiation, humor, manipulation, bullying, what else? Street smarts, essentially, right? Those are great skills that when I raise my kids, yeah, problem solving, good. And I raise my kids middle class. They have no street smarts. Like, I have just enough of my dad's upbringing in me that I could survive the zombie apocalypse for a short period of time, right? I know I can get fresh water out of the tank of the toilet, not the bowl, that's gross, but out of the tank of the toilet. Like, if the systems went down, I could survive for a little bit. My poor kids, because they were raised so middle class, that as soon as the Wi-Fi went down, they'd be sunk, right? I'd lose them in a heartbeat. They were like, I don't know how to Google it. I don't know what to do, right? They have no street smarts. But they do have what do kids learn in soccer, after school soccer, rec soccer, whatever you got. They're learning hierarchy, teamwork, structure, achievement, like teamwork. I think I said that already. All of those things. Can't navigate an area without GPS. It's a great statement. But think about what kids are learning by organized activities, and which of those two skill sets, street smarts, organized activities, sets them up. Yes, Jean, sets them up to be in the workplace. So that new employee you hired that has great street smarts, humor is a little off. Now we have to call HR, right? Can you coach these skills if you're hiring people from poverty? Of course, right? I work with an organization that works with mothers that are coming out of poverty and moving towards middle class, and we tell them it's like moving to another planet. Like, there's a different way to communicate on the playground than there is in soccer practice, and those hidden rules or those norms that exist in both environments, very important. Now, I'm a believer that we need both. We need that creative play for our kids. We need them to let them be kids, but then these skills that they're getting by soccer, also very important. And how do we balance those out? The book, The Other Wes Moore, is a great book for kids living. Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Passive aggressiveness of middle class is a great statement. Yeah. Okay, so think about childcare. Still happy with the school system when we don't have to pay for childcare anymore, so that doesn't change. Maybe voucher use is a little bit different, but now we are in the school system, and how many people do you know in middle class feel completely justified to call the school and tell the teacher how they're doing their job or what they need to do or how special their kid or whatever? And those are big stereotypes, I know, but I pay taxes. So those teachers kind of work for me. So they should do what I need to do, right? And so it's much more an equal information or relationship than it was for people in poverty. Same with the police, right? And my kid goes to school with your kid, and your kid's dad is a police officer, and so we have this friend relationship or whatever. So, you know, it's much more of an equal status type relationship. Most important, remember achievement, and then think about the interactions between these organizations and those in middle class, as well as businesses frequented by the middle class. Lex, good point. It's the freedom to know you can speak up without consequence. Not everybody has that luxury. And then vet clinics is one of the businesses frequented. You know, you can buy health insurance for your pet. very middle class mentality, right? Like my fur baby is going to get sick someday, so I need to invest now so I can deal with it when it gets later, right? That's very much a future oriented mindset. Would somebody in poverty do that? You know, probably not. Okay, next one. So for wealth, a lot less things around the circle. I will tell you that the majority of the US is middle class, and I said earlier, our religious institutions, our schools, our hospitals are all middle class mindset oriented, which will come into play next week. All three groups judge the other groups. And I find that wealth is highly judged, as well as poverty are highly judged, because most of the people are somewhere in that big middle class range in the US, so highly judge the other groups. You will see travel more than housing, oversight of corporate property and personnel concerns. National, international advisors, event sponsorship, vacation. Look at the same icon, but different terminology. Before it was legal issues with people in poverty. Well, now people are on my staff, so I can have them deal with what's going on. Did you know a grave is an asset that comes into play? Like having a grave site? I think that's what you're meaning, Rebecca. Clarify for me. So wealth mentality, you will share more with your lawyers, accountants, and therapists, more than you will with your own family member. Why do you think that is? Well, that's because they are legally bound to protect my secrets. Crazy Aunt Sue, if she goes off in La La Land somewhere, she can just blurt out whatever. So I typically, if I'm in wealth mentality, won't share things with family members or friends. I'll share them with lawyers, accountants, therapists, people that are legally bound. What I find interesting is that with wealth, it is less about individuality. In fact, they shun individuality. It's more about the family name, and we'll talk about that next week. Media, political linkages, board of directors, private clubs and associations. Keyword here, connections. Connections are very important. So let's take all three words in the middle of the circles. Connections, relationships, both people oriented. So what's the difference between connections and relationships? With poverty, it's more about inclusivity, right? If you're crazy Uncle Steve, whatever, you got a car, I'll let you sleep on the couch, right? It's about inclusivity. With wealth mentality, connections, people oriented, but it's about exclusivity. You have to be the right kind of person in order to interact with me. If you remember on the survey, it was about screens. Do you remember that one? You need so many screens of people to get through me. And it's not about computer screens or devices. It is about layers of people that you need to get through. You need to get past my doorman, my secretary, my admin assistant, and my physical therapist or trainer or somebody, right? You need to get through all of these people. Nobody can just walk up to me. You have to be the right kind of person in order to get there. This next slide, I won't hone in on, but if you are working with the wealth, good, valid, wonderful people as well. But if you go to the next slide, a lot of our funders come from wealth mentality people. And so how do you need to communicate with them in order to maintain that relationship? I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to spend time on this, but I'm happy to share this information with you. So this will come back around. Okay, keep going. So what you talked about was a mental model. Mainly we spent our time on generational poverty. So it's a description of the concrete experience. It's an abstract representation of poverty, and a part to the whole, but it depicts the relative importance and interlocking nature of the elements. Most important, I want you to take away from this session one is what you guys have already acknowledged before. We're living in the moment. It's a depiction of the trap. If I have no future, then I believe I have no choice. And if I believe I have no choice, then I have no power, like why even try? And I know that's a generalization, and I know that that's complicated, but very important when we're working with each other in order to meet people where they're at. Coach them where they need to be, but meet them where they're at. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Molly. So this tyranny of the moment is the need to act overwhelms any willingness people have to learn. Think about when you've been in crisis. How much more information were you willing to take in? My husband was T-boned in a car wreck. I got a call, meet him at the emergency room. He's going to need some extra clothing. Can you bring him? Blah, blah. And I walked into the ER and I'm looking for where to go. And I saw somebody I knew and I could not place this person at all. Like I was in just so much stress. Any new information was like, I don't even know. And I just blurted out, who are you? Right. And it's a sister of a friend I had, right? It didn't even matter. I was just so worried about living under stress that I couldn't process any new information. The healthier you are psychologically and the less you may seem to need to change, the more you can change. And if you are not as healthy or you're living under that much stress, patience, be patient. We can move the needle, but it is going to be patient. Okay, next one. So we have talked about today mental models, just an overview of the information that's out there. And I do apologize for kind of dismissing that comment about race earlier. It's so complicated and I appreciate you guys bringing that up and coming back around to that. Your mental model, and I encourage you to watch that historical trauma video, your mental model shapes who you are, just like somebody else's mental model. So I want you to suspend your own mental model and listen to people. Very important. How do you understand where they're coming from? Next week, we'll talk more, and I already kind of went through this, but yes, very important information. How do you recognize what shapes you? And I'm not asking you to dismiss it or to be ashamed of it. You are important and you are valuable, but you aren't the only way to do things. And I say that knowing that you probably already know that, but how many times do we need to be reminded that people come at life differently? My last slide is, yeah, Rebecca, thank you. Learn empathy. So this is my contact information. That's my personal cell number. You're welcome to reach out and text or give me a call and have more information. I'm going to do this all 3 sessions. I believe powerfully that we need to keep having this conversation. That's my website, and you can email me through there. It's melissa@mmartincommunication.com. So we're going to keep layering. This is the first of 3 sessions. Overview of what's going on, and we'll keep going. I'll take the last 3 minutes and have any other questions answer any other questions that you have.
I'm not seeing any.
Go ahead, Molly.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I'm not seeing a lot of questions, but I do have a few items as people are thinking about posting questions just to go over. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen just so I can post a few things in the chat. So first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. We're very grateful. As stated earlier, I'm going to put a survey in the chat box, and I'm going to do that right now so that if you would like to fill out that survey right now while everything is fresh in your minds, that would be great. You will also receive that survey via email. All of the materials from this presentation will be on our website in the next couple of days or early next week. And we're just really grateful you're here. Please sign up for the following webinars so that you can continue getting this great information, and please fill out the survey. So I'm looking to see if we have any other questions in the chat, and I see, I'm not seeing any. I'm seeing comments. I do see actually one question just got posted. Do mentoring programs move people to improve their lives?
So I'll let other people answer. Yes, I would agree. It's that building relationship, and we're going to come back around to that. So if your mentoring program is about establishing that relationship and working together, then yes, I would agree.
Okay, well, we are at just about the end of our time here. So thank you so much for presenting, and everyone will get the information. It'll be available on our website, the ICSPS website, by early next week. So you'll be able to find all of that there.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And I see actually we just got one more question came in that said, where can we find a good model of one? And I'm guessing that's for the mentoring program question. So I don't see any responses, but maybe that can be a question for the next webinar too. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone has a great day.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye.